In January of 1978, four friends had an encounter in the countryside near Rainford in Merseyside. What they saw that night has since become one of Britain's most unusual and unexplained humanoid sightings. Four friends, Jeff Hales, Stephen Simpson, Glyn Matthews and Keith Thomas, were heading home after an evening out in Rainford. The only sound was the hum of the car as it rolled along the dark country track. A simple choice: turn left or turn right. One would take them home. In error, they chose the other. The human-like figure stood in the middle of the track about 30 feet from the car. It was estimated to be between 6 and 7 feet tall and was clad in a pure white one-piece suit. The figure was very well built, very big for a human, and in the dipped headlights the witnesses could see no texture in the matte white material. Probably the most startling feature was the massive head or helmet which seemed to stretch across the shoulders so that only the tips of these were visible at the top of the arms. There were no features or visors on the squarish helmet, and Jeff Hale thought that the headgear was probably about 2 feet wide and approximately 1.5 feet deep. It wasn't round or square, but it sort of had both curved and flat areas, becoming more flattened at the top. They could see a definite boundary between the helmet and the body. The arms hung motionless by the sides. Stephen noticed that the sleeves ended with short forearms and a hand protruding from the suit. Unlike the rest of the figure, both the forearm and the hand were dark grey or black. The arms may have been a little shorter than ours. And Stephen remarked that he noticed fingers on each hand. On the figure's chest were 2 bright red flashing lights surrounded by a rectangular area. These lights seemed to alternate like a strobe, but slower. The figure had big white boots that seemed to be squared off at the front. Jeff shouted, "What's that? What's that?" And Stephen began screaming at him, "Get the bloody car out of here!" "I tried to select gear," said Jeff, "but I couldn't. My nerves had gone." As he frantically searched for the right gear, the white figure started to walk towards them, taking 3 or 4 small, careful steps. "I selected reverse eventually," Jeff continued, "and the car skidded around the corner, just missing backing into a tree. They turned left and sped off down the track. Stephen Simpson could still see the white figure through the back window before it was lost to sight around the bend. They tried to flag down a passing car, but to no avail. They pulled up at a farmhouse a little way down the track. Reluctantly, the farmer and his wife let Jeff and Stephen in, and they phoned the police at Kirby. The 2 other witnesses remained in the car outside. In about 10 minutes, the police arrived, 3 of them, including a sergeant. Jeff and Stephen went with the police to the scene of the incident, but after about half an hour of searching, they couldn't find any evidence for the presence of the white figure. The police returned to the farmhouse, and Jeff and his friends followed them back to Kirby Police Station. There, the police questioned them for some time and wrote out a report of the incident. They confirmed that none of the men were intoxicated, and just after 1 a.m. on Tuesday morning, all 4 left the police station for home. When he was interviewed at a later stage, the farmer confirmed that those lads were really scared when they called. They were not messing about. One of the officers was P.C. McCluskey, and he told the investigators that there was no doubt that they were scared both visibly and physically. I think they definitely saw something. The lad, who was asthmatic, was sat in the back of the car when we arrived. His knees were shaking and he was white and he couldn't speak properly. And when we got to the spot, I took the road to the right and I locked my car doors. I wouldn't have gone there on my own without a car radio. The asthmatic person in question was Jeff Hales. He had an attack in the car at the point that the creature began to walk towards them. The main two sources for this encounter are the Bufora Journal and the Flying Saucer Review. And it's the Flying Saucer Review that gives us a little bit more detail about the route that the guys took on the night. The time was at about 11:15 p.m, and they drove out of Rainford on the B5203 road. They turned left onto the old coach road, crossing the A570 and proceeding for about a mile through open country, heading west-southwest. At the spot that we have been able to locate as Ordnance Survey reference SJ456007, they came to a crossroads. To follow their scheduled route towards the A580, they should have turned left at this point. In fact, they turned right, which, in the conditions prevailing, was a very easy mistake to make since the surroundings are featureless and are somewhat similar in all directions. According to the Bufora Journal, the lads were drinking at the Golden Lion in Rainford, which is this place here. And the Flying Saucer Review says they left town on the B5203, which could either be this direction or this direction. So let's have a look at the route they probably took here. The lads were from a place called Kirby, and they were on their way home from some event, and they decided to stop at the Golden Lion in Rainford, and from here they took the B5203 out of town, which could be, as we say, either northwest up there or southeast. If they took the southeast path, it would have led them directly to the A570, which is the dark blue line I've put on the map here. However, the report specifically says they crossed the A570 and proceeded through open countryside. This option doesn't quite seem to support that. Otherwise, it might have just said they ended up on a different A road or something. Besides, they specified that they went onto the old coach road, which I think is further up. So they must have taken a left out of the Golden Lion and headed northwest here. We are told that they took a left turn and crossed the A570, so there's 3 potential left-hand turns as you traverse this route. The first being here, and it's named a possible left 3 on this map, which does cross the A570. However, it would seem to reach a bit of a dead end where you'd have to essentially traverse across a field, which I don't think is what happened. The other option is further up, and it's marked as possible left 1 on the map here, where the B5203 intersects with the A570. It does appear that there's a left turn there, and it says the 4 people travelled approximately 1 mile and came to a crossroads, which seems to cross-reference, so from this elevation it looks possible. However, that red line there is actually a railway track. A viaduct look, so that's not our option. So we're left with possible left 2, which, as you can see, crosses, or in this case, seems to go underneath the A570, and the pink line takes us about a mile, that's approximately a mile there, to a crossroads, and here's where they should have turned left, which would have taken them home, but they actually turned right. The wrong turn, as it were, and encountered the humanoid on some stretch of this particular road here. Now, if we zoom in a bit there, the pink line that I've drawn on the map is probably a bit skewed to the left, and if we take a look at the picture that accompanied the article in the Flying Saucer Review, we can see that the left turn and straight ahead options are slightly to the left of the road that we're on, and I think if this was tracked in more of a straight line, it would be more down this direction, and you probably would end up here, and indeed the left turn and straight ahead would be slightly to your left, so I think this is the place. Then they saw the humanoid and they reversed out of there and skidded around the corner. The Flying Saucer Review article tells us that they went back down the road they should have gone down, which is this red line here, where they should have turned left. And I think that Brown Birch Farm is where they ended up banging on the door asking for help and talking to the police. It's a bit of a long-winded way to go home, really, isn't it? Because if you're in the Golden Lion here, and you want to get back to Kirby here, and the A580, which is the yellow line down here, then why not just follow the blue line down, take a right turn and follow the A580? It seems they've gone a bit of a weird way home. So from Brown Birch Farm, really, there's a couple of options. Number one was to continue straight down that road and join the A580 here, or to take the back way, as it were, which would eventually bring you to Kirby. I suppose we really don't know which part of Kirby they lived in, do we? So we don't know what makes sense and what doesn't, but it seems like a strange way to go home in the dark. I suppose it doesn't really matter which way they decided to go home unless you start to think around the possibilities of one of the people being in on it, namely the driver, who decided to go that way to play a trick on his mates. But I mean, it isn't that unusual a choice to go home that way, I suppose. So it sort of works. One thing that I do find unfortunate, let's say, annoying, in fact, is that if I enter grid reference SJ456007 into this UK grid reference finder, it takes me to Shropshire and an address near Smethcott, which I've never heard of. But look how far away this is. It's not the right reference, is it? So maybe it's a typo, right? I mean, maybe they just typed that wrong in the publication. If we go to SD4567-100, then we end up pretty much slap bang in the middle of that crossroads. Another thing that sort of bugs me is that Jeff said they came to a T-junction, and he was supposed to turn left, but because he doesn't go down there very often, he turned right by mistake. But at this point on the map, there isn't a T-junction. It's a crossroads, isn't it? A T-junction would have suggested there was no way ahead, no way forward, only left or right. But I do still think this is the right place, because again, that corrected Ordnance Survey reference would place them pretty much here. So maybe Jeff just called it a T-junction and he meant crossroads. So what can our sceptical minds tell us about this? Well, the first thing, obviously, is it some sort of protective suit being worn by a worker or somebody working farmland or something like that? Is it like a hazmat or safety suit? Well, possibly, of course. But you'll notice the distinct absence of the mention of any kind of lighting, other than this red box with two red lights pulsating on the figure's chest. You'll also recall that this was at approximately 11:15 at night. It would be dark down that road, very, very dark. And why on earth would a person be dressed in such a suit with just red lights on the chest in the dark like that? There are no vehicles mentioned, no tape or barriers closing off the roads. There's nothing else at all mentioned, in fact. Is it perhaps misinterpretation of something else, a common object that you might find on a road or some reflective sort of material or something? But the thing walked towards them, didn't it? Or so the story goes. And yes, it was low light conditions, and it was dark, and it was winter, and they had been drinking, but are reported not to have actually been drunk. I can't think of anything that would appear to be a humanoid walking towards you wearing a massive helmet that might just turn out to be, I don't know, a signpost or something. I can't really bring anything to mind. So what if it's a bit of a prank? Then what if the driver wanted to play a bit of a trick on his pals, you know, and the guy in the suit was in on it? But then why go to the farmhouse and ring for the police? And why would the driver have an asthma attack in that instance if he knew what was going to happen? And if he didn't, why wouldn't they ring an ambulance instead of the police? And how did the guy in the suit get there in the first place, and where did he go afterwards? It doesn't add up to me at all. It doesn't sound like it could have been a prank. There are several other encounters with such beings, not only across the UK but across the world. In Broadhaven, in Wales, in 1977, there was an account, a famous one in fact, of a lot of school children who saw a UFO, and at the same time, several of the villagers reported having seen a tall, humanoid figure standing at the side of the road and wearing a silver suit. In Risley, Warrington, 1978, a young man named Paul witnessed a tall, humanoid figure standing near the roadside at night. He was about 7 feet tall and clad in a tight-fitting silver suit, and a featureless helmet as well. In Aveley, near Essex, 1978, a family driving home encountered a humanoid figure standing by the roadside, about 7 feet tall, with a large, squared-off helmet and glowing red lights on its chest. In Minot, North Dakota, 76, 2 police officers driving along a rural road at night encountered a similar figure, tall, silver suit, blocky feet, robotic gait. Exactly the same kind of entity. Voronezh in Russia, multiple witnesses in 1989 saw a giant humanoid figure near a UFO in a park. The figure was approximately 9 feet tall and wearing a metallic suit and a featureless helmet. It had elongated arms and it moved in a slow mechanical manner. Cusack in France, and 2 children witnessed 4 small humanoid figures in silver suits near a UFO. They appeared to move in a very strange and precise way, as if controlled by some sort of mechanical means. Mendoza, Argentina, 1968, a witness said a tall human-like figure was seen in a shiny silvery suit near a rural road. He was motionless and had a square, featureless helmet. In Palmasola, Bolivia, a bus driver in 1979 and his passengers encountered a very similar figure. Reflective suit, very tall, in a rural road. The figure's feet were blocky and it moved slowly. The witnesses were struck by its lifeless appearance. So what else could it have been if it was something weird? What was it? Was it an interdimensional scout, gathering information about our physical world, perhaps studying how humans perceive it, or testing the limits of its own interaction with our reality? It's a rural place. It's quiet. It's unobserved. It might have been chosen as a bit of a safety zone to potentially test out entry points of how to get in and out of our universe. Maybe the flashing red lights on the chest were some sort of stabilization device, that sort of generated a bubble of atmosphere for the entity to operate in. Maybe it's an exosuit from a species that's one of the last of its kind. It might not be a robot or mechanical thing. It might be a biological entity that uses this suit for survival. Maybe it's one of the last of a race of beings trying to find a compatible habitat. Maybe it was collecting data to see if the Earth could sustain its species, or searching for resources or something like that. Again, such a remote setting could have been chosen to avoid human contact. Or was it a ghost? Was it some sort of ghost on a lonely country road? We know there's lots of those, and perhaps they didn't really get a good look at it. And perhaps, it was see-through and transparent, and they saw other things in the distance through the haze of this ghost, such as some red reflectors fastened to a wall at the edge of a farm that helps people stay on the road at night or something. Who knows? It's certainly a strange one, isn't it? And a fascinating one, really, but there's not very much to go on. But you've got to ask yourself, at 11:15 at night, in winter, in a rural road that isn't really used, it's a private road anyway, what on earth would anybody really be doing there in a hazmat suit with no torch, no real lighting, no accompanying vehicle to get there? What on earth was it? What do you think? You let me know in the comments below. Hit the like button, please. It's the thumbs up button in the corner there. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And share this video with your friends and all that great YouTubey stuff. Bye for now.